although reading and viewing the material for this morning's discussion, not good at all.
Not at all.
In what way,
Uh,
Pete? And it's in the fact that you couldn't get through it, or the fact that it was too depressing?
Well, even the very first video, the one of Salim, my gosh, he goes down through what the administration has done in the United States, point by point, destroying everything, especially science, trust in science. It's just catastrophic and difficult to rebuild.
You can't get sometimes you can't get the toothpaste back into the tube.
Yeah, it's
easier
disaster.
to destroy than to build.
Always.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they don't even want the collection of data. If we never collect the data, even in the future, we won't be able to go back and understand what has happened, whether it's pollution, climate change.
Well, we'll know what it is then, and then we'll know what it was, and we just have to extrapolate.
I don't think this administration wants data. They don't like, no data.
No.
They're not releasing reports. There are several reports that they're not releasing. There's an annual report on, I think it's starvation or hunger or something they're not releasing. And there are several data reports that they're not even putting out anymore. They don't want that information out there.
Data is not
Correct.
their friend, so get rid of it.
Now, what I was going to talk about, maybe if I can start now, we're starting to have most of the people here. James is here, so we don't need to wait for anything, was the impact of the rapture people in America. They are such a strong group. The Pew Research Center says that this group that is concerned with the end times is about 39% of the U.S. adults, and they don't care about science. They know what they believe, and they're not going to take this data from science anyway. So why should we be spending money on the science? We want the end of the world to happen so we can have the rapture. Hallelujah.
Richard, it's so funny. I just wrote a blog post on that this morning, and I went through some of the history of it. If you go back to the 1800s with William Miller and the Great Disappointment, I don't know if you've read about that, but thousands of people were waiting on the hilltops, in robes. And,
yes.
It of course did not happen. And this is many examples. When I was in graduate school, there was a NASA engineer by the name of Ed Wisnett. I can't remember. He wrote a book, 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Occur in 1988. And when it didn't happen, he reissued it in 1989, and then 1992, and 1994. I mean, and this goes back, throughout history. In fact, by some interpreters, Jesus himself was a wild-eyed apocalypticist. So, what are you going to do? You're kind of cooked.
But
Mike,
with the rapture guys,
to...
then they don't believe in any of that. They just believe in what they have faith in, and what they want to do is to eliminate doubt. And this information just leads to people asking questions. That's trouble to the rapture guys. The rapture guys, another survey said in the 2020 U.S. election, 28% of the electorate was evangelical or born again, and of them, about 2/3 of them are these rapture guys. So they want the end of the world so they can all ascend to heaven and nothing else matters.
I don't think the driver is religion as much as it is profit. If you look back at history, Richard. I think the corporations denigrated science for their own profit.
I think there are several things working here, and
But
the
I'm looking
corporations
at
are
the
one of them,
historical.
but the rapture guys have a lot of political influence.
But I'm looking at the historical arc and looking at it globally. The whole thing, well, you can look at the tobacco industry as the case in point, and then also the petroleum industry. Both of those could get a flying whatever on
Sure, sure.
religion.
So what you're saying is certainly correct.
It's a witch's brew. It's a deep cauldron.
You know, guys, I hate to tell you, but the rapture happened and we're living in it. It's 7 years of hell on earth.
You're right about
And here we
that.
are.
Forgot about that, James. By the way, Richard, in case you want to read a book on it, this is my book. It's all about what you're talking about. You can't see it. It's called The Problem of Orthodoxy. Evangelicals at the Crossroads of Truth and Power.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
Here it is. You can see it now.
Hello.
This is the book. I can't.
Okay,
So
okay.
anyway, you can't see it, but
That's better.
Yes.
no.
You said you were calling from my record company. And I want to know who.
Somebody's online.
Yeah, I just muted Paul because he's got a telephone call.
The religious right may be an issue, but science deniers are throughout cultures. A large portion of Americans, regardless of religion, do not believe any scientific results.
And they don't understand them even if they tried to believe them. So,
Well,
it's
our education system, whether we have a Department of Education or not, is a clear failure. No, honestly, it's terrible. Our public education has failed. We don't have critical thinking. We don't have the trust in science that should be there. We've failed.
from the political perspective, it's worked perfectly. The more ignorant the population, the easier to control.
But
So success has to be
absolutely.
measured. Success has to be measured by the people in charge, right?
And James, I think that's a really critical point because when you listen to the rhetoric of conservatives, I can't remember, there was someone, well, I know J.D. Vance is on record as saying education, or higher education is the enemy. Well, of course it's the enemy because higher education is the repository of facts, and that's not going to help his cause. But I can't remember, there's one of them that I just the other week said, you just shouldn't send your kids to college anymore. And yet her kids were in college. And I think that's part of the whole thing. Some of these people who are, just berating higher education and education in general, well, their kids are getting educated because guess what? It's to their benefit that their kids get that kind of education, and that then the rest of, the people that can work at Walmart, let them work at Walmart because that's good for us.
And
Yep,
it's
absolutely.
associated with vaccine deniers too. Some of the famous ones, like Trump, all of his kids were vaccinated.
More's the pity.
Well, my wife was born in the Philippines and she finished high school, but high school in the Philippines only goes to the 10th grade. And they teach you absolutely nothing about their government. So nobody has a clue as to how the government works, the importance of voting for candidates that support what you believe in and so forth. They want you to be totally ignorant. And during the time of the Spaniards, it was prohibited to teach Spanish. Nobody could speak Spanish except the Spaniards. So they had like their own secret language. The less you knew about those governing you, the better.
Amen.
It ain't getting better.
No.
Actually,
Bob, as usual, sent us some really excellent reading, and as
Yes.
always, I scoured it to find something that didn't make me depressed as hell. And I actually found something. It's I think it's the very last article. It's by Nature. It's the article about the 68 countries and how they feel about science. I urge all of you to study closely figure one, what they call figure one. It's really graph one that rates countries on the basis of how much trust, relative trust, the population has, and you will be astonished. Let me just give you uh, the thing that I learned from this article that just blew me away, and I think is relevant to this discussion today because it lays a foundation, is that all of our assumptions, according to these studies, according to all of our assumptions that liberals are more pro-science than conservatives, not. Uh, Africans are less pro-science than everybody else, not. It's you can see it's region by region. India has one of the highest trust in science ratings in the world, way higher than France. France is down with Bangladesh. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I saw
I
that.
just throw that out so that we can keep in mind that when we're talking about science in the world, it's really more weird than I had ever suspected. Thanks, Bob.
yeah, did you look at the correlation between political systems and the trust?
Yes. Uh, I urge everybody to really dig into that if you haven't already. It is positively eye-opening.
So as the United States declines, where do you see, besides China and India and Africa, the bright points of intellectual discourse and scientific advancement?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all heading in from the U.S. perspective in the wrong direction. And I hate to point that out, but one of the major centers of science in the ancient days preceded the ones in Europe in Africa. There were several empires that were not only rich in trade, but rich in knowledge. So, um, yeah, you really threw a monkey wrench into everything I thought I knew, Bob. There you go again.
Well, that's a great compliment, I think, James.
Yeah.
I was
It
able to
is.
just defend everything.
Yes.
So, the one thing that doesn't line up with what you were saying, James, is the current medical advances in Israel versus their road down towards authoritarianism and dictatorship.
Exactly.
That one I couldn't square in my mind.
Yeah. All
Good point.
it's just I'm still sitting here and probably will be next week puzzled.
Well, I understand India and I understand China, and it's just amazing what they're doing in Africa. But South America and other parts of Asia, well, I shouldn't say other parts because there is some bright spots in Asia. But South America seems to be kind of a blank.
It's spotty, yeah,
Yeah.
but still not as bad as I thought it was, or would be. Uh, these results are so wild. I even dug deeply into the methodology because this study was one of the few that had the courage to publish that. And the only flaw I could find in their methodology was the fact that in some African countries they had to use English or French to interview their subjects, and which meant they only had the educated people that they were talking to. But if that's the only flaw in these studies, and it appears to be from my review of them, wow.
Well, one wonders why the French have so little confidence in science. Is it that they're individually arrogant? They think they know it? So why would they listen to science?
Heaton, you hit the nail on the head first time. They are the most, I love the French. Some of my best friends are French, but they are the most arrogant people on the planet, and you got it absolutely right. They know everything, and don't tell them nothing.
Paul, a question for you, with the, as a Canadian up there, and by the way, you're muted. As a Canadian up there with all the defense turning around and so forth, is there going to be a blossoming of science due to self-survival?
You're speaking to Marge Goss?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not Canadian. I'm
Oh, I
actually,
thought you were.
no, I'm from Maine. That's pretty damn close, but not quite.
Oh, okay.
And I live in Florida. But I don't know. I was just off on a whole different tangent than everybody else. So I was just kind of taking it all in, since you were looking at it from a different perspective than I was. I was learning some things. But I guess I think I got sort of set on a tangent because I read something about Alistair McIntyre, who died, I forget, this year or last year, but recently, and I'd never really heard of him. But he was a moral philosopher, and one of his claims was that the Enlightenment had failed. And I really had to kind of step back and I don't know, it just made me think of a lot of things. But in light of today's talk, one of the things I looked at was whether or not the word science is really a mode of discourse. It's not the practice of scientists so much. It's a way of looking at life based on evidence and reason. And that seems to be being, first, it seems to be very class related in the US. People who have higher education tend to speak more in a scientific mode, looking for evidence, for instance, rationality. And there's a real class distinction in this country. And I think part of what's happened politically is that those people who speak in the scientific mode are the elites, or the people who are criticized as being elite. And so the rebellion against science is as much a class rebellion as, or maybe more so than anything to do with science itself. So that's kind of the track I went down. I looked at about half of the videos. I have to thank Bob for his extensive bibliography. I'm lucky to get to half of them. So
If I can put in a defense for the poor farmer who is not a member of the elite, having grown up on a farm surrounded by farmers and their kids, they're some of the most practical, rational thinking people on the planet. So I think you have a good point that rational thinking and not confusing correlation with cause and effect is a very high order brain process, but it's not limited, I think, to social class. I think it's a question of social circumstances. Are their parents rational thinkers? Do they have enough food to think at all? Do they have opportunities to think? Does thinking improve their lives? All of these are true on farms, not so much in the slums, is what I'm saying. But it's a situational
Circumstance,
thing.
sure.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, James, and I wonder if there's been a little bit of a shift, and I'll tell you why. Like in my mom came from a farming family, you know, in the Depression and all that. Very high value of higher education. She did not get to go to higher education. One of the things that she said, tragically in my view, was that daughters of East Texas dirt farmers, I never have quite figured out what a dirt farmer was when she'd say that, but that's what she'd say, dirt farmers.
I know.
Okay. But daughters of East Texas dirt farmers don't get to college. She would say, I knew there was a University of Texas, but I knew that I didn't get to go there. But she very highly valued higher education, as did really everyone in their family, even though they didn't necessarily participate in it themselves. And that's why from the time I was knee-high to a grasshopper, you're going to college, you're going to college, you're going to college. I think having lived at Penn State for so many years, which is a big university in a rural area, I don't know if maybe there's been a shift there because there was a lot of animosity towards Penn State and higher education, even though Penn State had improved the lives of these people demonstrably, even just their property values alone, because they were within 10, 15 miles of Penn State, were far higher than they would have been in another rural area. And I just wonder if that resentment and, you know, the changes between Davis, because I know what you're talking about there in Davis. And of course, that was in the university community also of sorts. But I just wonder if there hasn't been a little bit of shift in that to where, I don't know, the resentment or whatever has crept in there and it's not quite the same as it was back in the days when we were chasing Davis. I may be wrong about that. That's just sort of my gut instinct from talking to a lot of people when I lived in Pennsylvania Furnace who were so hostile towards Penn State, even though there was just down the road, 5 miles, an agricultural research center that would take their cows in and evaluate their livestock. I mean, Penn State had spent millions of dollars. Farmers could bring their cows there, have them evaluated, what's going on, and yet you get them back on the farm, and boy, they just cuss Penn State all day long. I've never quite understood that phenomenon.
Now, I come from farmers on both sides and my grandparents, and the one thing I have to say is farmers were very practical people. And, you know, they had to solve problems basically every day. And if you have to solve problems, I think you start to appreciate science and the scientific method. You know, trying stuff. The heart of the scientific method is trying something and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, what can I do to make it work?
Bingo. Brief response to Bob's question. I think part of the problem is the circumstances have changed because there's about 80% fewer farmers out there now as when I was a
Right.
kid. And
The
what
US,
we don't really have farming communities really
No.
anymore. Maybe some scattered in Montana, but who, you know, there's only 10 people there, so not representative.
I
in the
also
rural,
think,
there's still lots of farming communities. I certainly around the small town in India where I lived for a bunch of years, you know, 80% of the people lived on farms and worked on farms.
Well,
I
that's not
also,
the case today in the United States. It's a
Joyce, go ahead.
huge industry,
Yeah,
and
Joyce.
it's dominated by Monsanto and their seeds and so forth. So it's not individual family farms very much anymore in the United States.
Joyce, make your point, then we'll come back
That's
to the
true.
concept
Okay.
of corporate farming.
okay, well, this actually relates to farming because I've been reading some things that my aunt, who was born in the like 1915 or something, wrote about her parents who were farmers in Oklahoma. And they had all very low education, but they highly valued education, and each one of their children was able to get a college education and live a decent middle class life, semi-professional life, depending, teachers and people who are poor and lack a lot of education cannot do that anymore, at least in the United States. And so I think there's no, my grandparents had a desire for their children to get there. And I don't think there's a belief among people, with a high school education or less, that their children can become, let's say, doctors. And so if it's something that can't happen, you tend to devalue it. And so I think it's sort of started a spiral of devaluating the education and then saying, well, you are actually looking down on me, so therefore I hate you. So I think part of it is just the astronomical increase in the price of education and the
Yes.
inability for children of the working poor to succeed.
I encourage you to read the book Meritocracy, The Trap of Meritocracy. It explains just what you said, that people that are wealthy can afford to send their children to college, but the middle class, which has lost buying power, at least through inflation, are no longer in a position to send their children to college. It's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I did some research on why the cost of higher education has skyrocketed, and the evidence is pretty clear that excluding inflation, 90% of the increased cost of higher education is administrative, both in terms of internal faulty roll and government compliance. So, but we're wandering off the topic. At least I am, and I apologize. Yeah. Somebody have something on topic to say?
Well, I was going to say, Norman and I were both brought up in a home where engineering was the issue. Everything had to be a critical thinking. I mean, not just my father, but his father, my mother's father. All of these people were very, very technical, and everything had to be justified through logic. Everything was rational. When I think about going to a restaurant, my wife might think, well, the people there, I don't like them so much. The ambience is not something I like there. And I'm going, well, the cost versus the serving sizes and, maybe the quality of the food, those sort of things. That's, the way I'm thinking. And she has this kind of, I don't know, fuzzy kind of feeling because she is so much more emotionally driven than I am. I don't go into a restaurant and go, oh, I don't like this, no. So it shows that there are very different approaches. The scientific, rational that I believe Norman applies. And when you talk about education, my younger brother, as well as my older brother Norman, we all have had at least 7 years of higher education. That is not the same as most middle class families.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the
I'm glad you
things that
stopped there because you were getting into trouble. So there we go.
Go ahead.
one of the things that's maybe part of this backlash is that I think there's been resistance to demands for change or compliance based on science, like climate change, for instance, or vaccination or the responses to COVID. I think people have rebelled against mandates imposed because of scientific findings or at least scientific claims. And so it rubs against people's sense of individual autonomy.
I
feels
I think that's true, but the thing that I think about when I was 7 years old, and you know what I'm going to talk about, how they lined us up at school for the polio vaccine or
Yep.
whatever it is, and it was in a sugar cube, or I can't, and one time they had a bubble and they, no one, I mean, there wasn't even a thought that you wouldn't, go along with this. The parents, of course, yeah, that's right. We want to get our kids vaccinated. So I think what you're saying is correct. I just think there's been some kind of shift. I can't specifically identify what it is, but it's just different than it was, in the 50s and 60s when there was no thought that you wouldn't get your kids vaccinated. Of course you get your kids vaccinated. I mean, I can remember when I was in pharmaceutical sales calling on a physician who actually went and got a home in Colorado City. If you know where that's at, it's south of Pueblo. It's a little tiny little place. And he was a practicing physician in Pueblo because he didn't want his kids around polio. I mean, people were fleeing if they could. It's so different today.
There's
I
a
do
loss
think-
of trust today.
I
Well,
think
I think-
COVID, I'm
Go ahead,
sorry.
Joyce. Joyce, you
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
You got
Okay, I think COVID played a lot of a part of, if you think about in the United States, the poor people kept working and getting COVID. So like, your grocery store employees or your Walmart employees, they were working. The educated elite sat at home in their computers and yelled at people for not wearing masks. And I think a lot of poor people felt very angered by that. And I think that was part of it, that you take your family, whatever, and you move you and your family out of trouble, and then you sit at home and dictate what I should do. I mean, it sounds insulting just to say it. I can only imagine what a lot of people felt like.
Like watching
If I
a
could make,
endless stream of All in the Family, wouldn't it?
Well, the other thing, somebody mentioned the, tobacco companies, this whole strategy of funding pseudoscience, I think has eroded trust in science because you've got a, whataboutism or something. In other words, you've got rival scientific claims. I think with polio, there may have been less, rival. It was an obvious bad thing. There was an obvious remedy for it. Enough said. But now we have the fossil fuel industry, the tobacco industry. I mean, they're all playing the same game of funding their own science, if you will.
I have to emphasize the importance of the social networks because they have spread misinformation, disinformation at a horrendous rate. And because what Facebook and the other platforms want is more attention, they quickly spread bad information because bad information moves faster than the truth. So they are in large part responsible for people who don't believe in vaccines and other anti-scientific thoughts, shall we say. Anyone want to deny that?
Well, the only thing I would say on that is that there was no profitable counterpart to the polio vaccine. Whereas, there's a profit in tobacco industry, but there was no counter industry with polio. It was just polio. And,
Yeah.
and it affected a lot of people, and a lot of people were dying. So, or put into iron lungs.
So the only industry that supported it was the iron lung industry.
That's a small thing. I remember, this is an aside, I remember walking through a hospital on my way to school. It was on the walking path to school that I had to go through every day. And the sole purpose of this hospital was iron lungs.
Oh, God.
And iron lungs.
what's the profit analog to anti-vaccine? Herbal remedies. I mean, that's one that's really, I just can't figure that one out.
That is the, if you look at the profit, at the sales sheets on supplements, it's huge.
Yeah, I know it is. I mean, it seems a little remote to me, but I mean, most people take supplements not for to combat COVID. They take supplements for other reasons. I can't identify well, of course, that one thing that Trump was pushing for a while, but that's just one thing. And I think that was a pharmaceutical. So I haven't figured out what the profit, motive is against vaccines. It just seems a little strange to me.
I agree, it's strange, but it's not that somebody is profiting so much from being against vaccines. It's just that it's something that people talk about. If somebody says, my son got a vaccine and a week later he had autism, maybe it's completely untrue. Like when they publicized the story about the woman who had 10 babies to take the focus away from their political scandal. That was one of the articles. And, so it's not that necessarily somebody's going to profit from the opposite approach. That's to say, to not have vaccines, but instead take supplements. But rather, it's something that keeps you glued to Facebook or whatever. And then you see the advertisements, which is what they're really interested in. So they do make money by misinforming, spreading disinformation.
Keeping your eyeballs.
Yeah.
And not just
Exactly.
the social media companies, but all the influencers that are on them, the TikToks and the Instagram and all of those people, that's how they make their living. I was
Yeah.
shocked when my nephew said, "Oh, I want to be an influencer for a living." And you're going to be kidding. But he was serious. I mean, there are a lot of people making a lot of money on those social media
Yes.
platforms.
Mm-hmm. And if they say things that are highly inflammatory, they'll get
Again,
more
things
eyeballs.
that'll get eyeballs.
Yep, absolutely.
It's interesting that when we were younger, kids said, I want to be a nurse or a doctor to help people. Now young people say, I want to be an influencer to make money. I think it is in that distinction or that difference, we can see what's happened. To get back to Bob's question, which is what the hell happened? I mean, Mike's question, what the hell happened? The world changed from, at least American world, changed from a community-based to a me first, me only base. Now, how that happened, I don't know, but you look around and you can see and go back in your memory banks, that's exactly what happened. There used to be communities, now it's me only.
And it changed with Reagan, and the philosophy became greed is good.
That's part of it.
Well,
I remember that.
That's a really, important insight. If you think about JFK's question, ask not what you can do for your,
Right.
that's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And Reagan's question was, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? So, you can see that shift even in presidential rhetoric.
Bingo.
Well, there was also a zeitgeist because you had Milton Friedman
No
building
bad
up a
language.
following about individual choice markets solving government problems, leading up to Reagan saying government is the problem. But it wasn't just that. In the intellectual world, Kohlberg was and to a lesser extent Piaget were talking about morality as individual decision making and coming to the conclusions rather than it being a social phenomena. And in biology, probably all of us read The Selfish Gene. So at that time, there was a complete denial of any such thing as group selection. So it was basically, we were taught it was all up to individual genes. So there was a whole zeitgeist of emphasis on the individual as opposed to the communal. So now when we look back and shake our heads like, how did this happen? I'm not saying exactly how it started, but there was a whole the zeitgeist changed. There were, depending on where you came at it, if you came at it from economics, if you came at it from psychology, if you came at it from genetics, you got the same message. It's all about individuals competing. It's never about individuals cooperating. It's never about community. And I think we're reaping the results. And part of what I think the evangelicals and the radical right are peddling is community. They're peddling a rebellion against that rampant
Saving of
individual.
self, saving of self. You're absolutely right. If you're a good
I'd like to
Christian,
point,
yeah, go ahead. Excuse me.
there are cultures that are different in that regard. I
Absolutely.
am surrounded by people from Japan that are focused on community. When they get into an elevator ahead of you, they press the hold button, the door open button. I walk into the elevator and I immediately press my floor. And if somebody is trying to get in, well, good luck getting into the elevator. That's their problem. I'm interested in what I want. I don't think about anyone else. But the Japanese that I've met, and I'm talking also about Nisei, born in the States, but Japanese parents or grandparents, whatever, they are amazingly interested in community. They follow the rules even. Like they won't
Right.
cross against the red light. They wait for the walk sign.
Even when nobody's
walk when
looking.
Yeah, it's a different culture, really, truly, and it's preserved for generations when they come to America. Amazing, quite different.
Before we continue on a little bit, I want to bring in something else that I didn't put in the readings, but I think is applicable. I know that James and I have been talking a little bit about it, and that's the role of movies in predicting what's happening. 3 examples: V for Vengeance. I hope you've ever seen that. The great classic satire, Brazil.
Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the third one that really hit it on the head was Idiocracy, which is now considered a
Yes,
documentary, which is
right.
dropping on
I watched
Netflix
that
on
last
the
week.
28th. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
And-
Gotta watch
and
those.
It had an interesting premise as to the reason for all of this that touches about what we've talked about, in that people of lower intelligence bred like rabbits, whereas people of high intelligence waited until they were a little more settled, a little more settled, a little more settled, and ended up not having any kids in the end. And so, using the evolutionary law of genes, what happened is that we had a population that became dumbed down. And oddly enough, the movie was in 2006, and the date of this fantasy time travel type of thing, the person from 2006 woke up in 2025, which is now, to be confronted by this world.
Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah. So,
On
Wow.
that
and,
on that
and,
point, Bob, I
pardon?
just finished reading or rereading I, Robot, and
Yeah.
Asimov estimated in one of his stories in the year 2050, the world population would be 3 billion. Well, we're already basically at 9. So I just throw that out to put in as a possible additional how the hell did we get here kind of factoid.
Uh-huh.
Even Asimov thought we would be at 3 billion, and we're 3 times that.
But what is said about the people that wait to have children, I'll tell you, my son went to Punahou, same as Obama. And when I went to the annual carnival where they try to raise money for the school, I was amazed to see that the parents were so old. None of the parents were in their 20s. They were in their 30s, 40s, and above. I got married when I was 37. And I think that was pretty typical. So-
my son,
Yeah, go ahead.
my son has made the decision to not have any children, and a lot of his friends have made the same decision. I can't think of one of his, because he goes back to State College at Prairie to visit them, and I'm running through my mind, his friends. I can't think of one of them that has a child.
Well,
It's a disaster.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm very glad that my son finally got married and had a baby on August 18th. Because he has 2 doctorates and his wife has a doctorate. That's going to be one smart kid, and I hope that that child will change the world for the better. But if we that have the intelligence don't reproduce, yes, it's going to be a dumbing down of the world's population. And honestly, it's pretty bad, because we see that some of the poorest folks in America are having the most children, and they certainly don't have the money to send them to universities. For heaven's sakes, that's just not even thought of. They just want to feed them.
Well, Elon Musk has a solution. He has a bunch of kids.
That is the exception. That is the exception to the rule. You're right. I can't deny it.
And I don't know how mentally sound any of his kids are going to be, given their father and their home life. So there's that too.
I agree with you on that point, because
Right.
Elon Musk is crazy. You got to read his the biography. It's not an autobiography. It's by Isaacson, but it's very detailed, very good. Musk is an outlier. He's crazy, absolutely crazy.
So,
But he has lots of kids.
so let me
Yes.
pull a couple threads together and have you react. And these are the threads. The fact that the Department of Education has been very successful in its, since 1980, goal of dumbing down education and making people not as stupid and not be critical thinkers. The fact that we have this bifurcation within America between the elitists and those that look up and say, who are they to talk to us? And the two things that are happening in the technology side, the flourishing of the internet, social media and platforms. And why do you need critical thinking when you have AI?
It's a perfect storm, Bob.
Pardon?
It's
Yeah,
the perfect
really.
storm. There's no question about it.
Well, one of the reasons you need critical thinking when you have AI is I've been reading reports. The companies have been spending a lot of money on AI and haven't been getting return on their investment, a lot of them. And they say the reason why is they have to spend more time reviewing and correcting all this crap that came out of AI, because they still haven't got AI away from giving an answer even when it doesn't know.
No, I'm not talking about that side of it. I'm talking about the use by the common person who just says, okay, I've got this assignment, I've got to do this thing. Why bother, doing research, doing critical thinking? I'll just ask a question and AI will give me an answer.
Uh-huh.
It's quite good at that, I can tell you that. My wife had to go
Dangerous.
through a terrific retool of her test banks and processes, because this was even 2 years ago when it first came out. When we fed a few of her statistics questions into the earliest of the AI generators, Chat GPT, whatever it was. And most of the time, and this is a question that went through with James. It always got the math right. Now, statistics is a little bit different for those, and I don't know anything about statistics. I'm just telling you what my wife tells me. But it is a little bit different, a little bit more subjective and viewpoint oriented. but it spit out 99% of those answers correct. And guess what happened? She started to see her assignments, and change, and you could put the AI stuff. She had to completely revamp just to try to avoid the problems with AI. And I'm not sure she's avoided all of them, but it seems like it's better. But it's been pretty difficult.
I've of all the AI generated research I've reviewed, at least 80% of it was wrong. Not on its face wrong necessarily, but wrong because it leaves things out. And my most famous example of that was somebody asked to do a review of the Dow. What's the Dow all about? And they cranked out a 3-page thing and did not mention Lao Tzu. It's like reviewing the Bible and not mentioning Jesus or Moses. Okay. So somebody could go away with that. It was a perfectly good outline of the Tao, but left out its origin, who did it, and half of Lao Tzu's interpretation of it.
My counter story is I asked AI to give me a 1-paragraph definition of infralapsarianism. Now, probably most of you can't do that because it's a very theoretical topic in theology. And the answer it spit out was better than I could have. But, that's, I think, the problem. It can do this and it can do that. And I think the big thing is, what's it going to be able to do in 5 years, 10 years, et cetera? I think that's probably why these companies are still pouring money into it. I can remember somebody saying, investment advice said, don't invest in Amazon. They haven't turned a profit yet. Well, they finally did turn a profit. But, I think that's what these corporations are banking on is, yeah, we're not getting a good ROI now, but we think there's going to be one down the road. So we'll keep pouring money into it.
My example of using AI, I asked my son who just returned from Japan, what I should see when we visited Japan. And he just put me on to AI, and AI gave me a perfect schedule of what to see in Japan, things that were close to each other, so I could go from one to the next to the next. Perfect. For something like that, ideal.
Yeah.
But you don't know what it left off the list. See, if you do your own research, you will find the things that AI didn't bother to tell you about because either it didn't find it or it didn't care or it was having a bad Thursday.
Well,
I found it complete. I know Japan to some degree, and I've looked at tourism guides, but what I needed was an itinerary, and that's what it created. I knew what I wanted to see, and it satisfied that. I think
So
you
that's
had to
different.
define, but I had to define what cities I was going to visit, how much time I had available, things like that, and my priorities. I didn't want to spend all my time in museums, for example. And so with the right instructions, it came up with the correct itinerary, I believe.
Good thing you weren't going with your brother Norman. He would have wanted to go to all the museums.
One last question. Do you see the pendulum swinging at all in the future back towards science and reason and looking at things empirically again, or do you not?
Well, I think in America, when we get rid of Trump, there's going to be a big effort to try to restore what he broke. And I think that will put more resources into science. But I think the rebuilding is going to be a lot tougher because we've lost a lot of resources and human resources in the time. As to the world, I don't know.
Don't discount the possibility that J.D. Vance might be the president.
Yeah.
Please, 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 please.
No.
No, I believe in the pendulum. that, you know, when we go too far in one direction, we're going to snap back and go perhaps even too far in the other direction. So after Trump, if J.D. Vance, God forbid, does not become our next president, we may actually be putting more emphasis on science, more emphasis on scientific research.
And I'm not afraid of J.D. Vance because nobody likes J.D. Vance, not even the Republicans and not even the guys who with money.
But his
Although I
wife
did-
likes him, unlike Trump.
True. And I did talk to somebody the other day who likes JD Vance. He said he's really smart. And I said, really smart is not the same as, having charisma or anything like that. But
And effective.
I'm not real enthusiastic, Bob, just to answer your question. I think maybe I'm more pessimistic than others in the sense that I see power dynamics. And one of the things in the articles that I didn't see addressed, I didn't think well enough, is how much power dynamics and again, I hate to overuse this word, but the orthodoxy of the right are motivating some of these behaviors. One of the articles that I read that was so poignant was that it was written by a nurse who had a patient with her, and the doctor was in the room, and she was dying from COVID. And the doctor was said, ma'am, there's nothing more we can do from your lungs or this and that. We can't do anything for her. And the last words she ever spoke were, "It can't be true. COVID is a hoax."
Yeah.
So, this was a person who literally died for their beliefs. I mean, they don't call it drinking the Kool-Aid for nothing. I mean, that comes straight out of Jim Jones. And I don't think they talked about the power dynamic and the sociological factors of this deeply enough in some of the articles. And I sometimes think our problem is, progressives sometimes bring olive branches to knife fights. And I think that's part of the reason we can sometimes get so, trashed in some of these things. I mean, one of the things to watch the Republican juggernaut, and I think Keaton is right. I think it will swing back to a certain degree. But one of the things that I've been impressed with the Republican juggernaut is they don't mess around. They do not play around. They know what they want to try to do, and they do it. And it seems like the Democrats just don't have the moxie to do what they need to do to fight back.
Of course, you
Yeah.
gotta remember the Republicans have been planning this for decades.
Why haven't the progressives been doing the same?
well, I have to say, I listened to Chuck Schumer the other day talking about the budget shutdown, and I felt exactly like you do, Mike. Like, oh my God, you went to World War II with a paper airplane.
Yeah, that's the point.
That was interesting. I've been looking at some videos from my humanist group by Joan Williams, wrote the book Outclassed. And she made an interesting point that part of Trump's appeal to the blue collar people is that he speaks in very plain, authoritative. He has a certain, she said, psychologically, it's called something like bad but good, and she said that on the left, the only two people she thinks who can speak anything like Trump is Bernie and John Fetterman. And she said, and I went to see a rally lately with, Bernie's, a protest rally where he spoke. And I got to admit, I mean, he's just, he gets up there and kind of waves his finger and goes, we should have Medicare for all. End of sentence, very short, punchy. This is what, and so it helped explain why you could have an election where people were making a choice between Bernie and Trump. It's kind of like, how could those be their choices? Because they spoke the same way. They appealed to the same emotions, even though they had different prescriptions. But as you say, I think I love that phrase, by the way, of going to World War II with a paper airplane. That's a wonderful phrase.
One of the calculations to go into what you guys have been saying, one of the calculations that hasn't been done or taken into account is the degradation of language due to the dumbing down of America.
Yeah. You listen to people and they don't use adverbs anymore. It's always an adjective. Watch it. It's, you know, he speaks good. It's terrible.
It's all newspeak. That's what we're getting. It's dumb. The language is being dumbed down in schools and in the press and everywhere. And pretty soon we'll be down to 500 words, and then we won't have to have these conversations. And if I can leave everybody with a uplifting thought, you know, we're talking about the pendulum swinging and the rebuilding. I just want to point out that the Ming dynasty, followed by the Qing dynasty, was against science, and they kept it under wraps for 400 years. So let's
Ouch.
just hope we don't repeat that bit of history.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, they
So-
recovered from Mao much quicker than that, the Cultural Revolution.
Yes.
Yes.
No, that's true. That's true. That's a better model.
Well, I had something that I've sort of pondered this a few times and never had an excuse to say it to anybody, but since Bob included that piece about Galileo,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I thought a long time ago,
300 years
yeah, that when
to correct it.
Galileo, was faced with the Inquisition, that this is my own conspiracy theory, was that he had a good lawyer, and the lawyer went to the Pope and said, Pope, could we cut a deal here? And the lawyer said, and the Pope made a deal with him, because the Pope was thinking of the line of demarcation. You must remember when the Pope divided the Western Hemisphere. And the Pope said, tell you what I'm going to do, Galileo. I'm going to let you off, but you have to promise that you and your progeny, meaning scientists, will only deal with what can be observed. And you will leave what can't be observed to the church. And I think when humanists emphasize evidence, they are just reaffirming their commitment to Galileo's deal with the Pope. We will only deal with what's observable and what's evidence, and we will leave it to the religious people to deal with what's not observable, primarily faith, if you will. And so in the end, Christians still fear burning in hell, and scientists have to fear burning at the stake.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful analogy.
Well, actually, I don't.
Do you mind if I borrow that?
Oh, go for it. Takes the heat off Descartes for not really starting the mind-body problem. Actually, about the same time, right? 1633 was about the time of the cogito. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Very good. Super.
Thanks, Bob, for the opening.
Our hour's just about up. Next month, because you guys wanted to talk about compassion and empathy, we're going to talk about compassion and empathy and looking at what it means to be a secular humanist, where compassion and empathy are basically part of the ethical living that we affirm. The inherent worth and dignity of every person that we affirm.
Excellent.
And one of the things that I'm curious about, speaking of facts only, is there such a thing as a empathy or compassion gene? And because some people obviously do not have it.
From.
So anyway.
All right.
Look
Thank
at
you for
mirror,
hosting.
Yes,
look at
thank you,
mirror
Bob.
neurons.
Yeah. So have a great week.
Thanks,
I'll talk to you
everyone.
all later.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Adios.
Wow.
All right,
Yeah.
thank
Many
you, Bob.
thanks.